Good morning, everyone. Thomas Montgomery. It's a beautiful Tuesday morning, June 14th, 2022. We get together with our distribution partners most weekday mornings at this time, 8 o'clock Central, to talk strategy, success stories, tips, and just really here to support each of you. Today, we're going to talk about a concept of flipping debt, and it is relevant regardless if you're a current debt buyer or not. If you're a current debt buyer, it means you already have bought a portfolio that you're sitting on. Maybe you purchased it to increase the strength of your balance sheet, to address a collateral shortfall, and or to improve your income statement in terms of, on the accrual method of accounting, showing greater profit. Or you may not have done that, but this is just an interesting concept. People often talk about flipping real estate or getting involved with cryptocurrency. But I think after our brief discussion today, I think that you'll see that flipping debt has much less risk and much greater upside than, frankly, even dealing with the headaches of fix and flips in real estate, or certainly the very volatile world of cryptocurrency. So let's dig into it, and then we'll address questions. So our topic today is how to flip debt for a profit. Just 3 simple steps. Of course, you need to have debt to be able to flip. Now, those of you that are white label partners, we got Bernard on the line, we've got Alfred, Charles, number of you, Lon, number of you are white label partners. So you might have in-house debt, right? You don't need to go acquire it. You might have some clients that have enrolled as a white label client through your white label agreement, and they have not performed. So now you have a non-performing debt instrument. So I understand, so this could be applicable to those of you that have non-performing clients, or it could be those of you that want to purchase a debt portfolio to execute this strategy off of. If you're acquiring a debt, then you pay 1% of the principal value. So when we talk about principal, how much is debt worth? Well, debt can have multiple components, depending upon how the agreement is written, that the debtor have the terms that they've agreed to. But normally there's the principal amount, and then there very well could be interest fees and or late charges. There could be court cost, filing fees, collection cost. So it can vary specifically based upon how the agreement is written, but the principal value is the core amount. So one of our lead attorneys is, he does a lot of litigation for Mercedes-Benz. So if you buy a Mercedes, finance it through Mercedes-Benz Financial, you default on it, then his firm will arrange the repossession and then the litigation to collect for the shortfall from it. So the principal amount of a repoed car is what's owed on the car, but there's often other fees involved. So with that being said, 1% of the principal value. So if you're acquiring debt through our collateral support program, this is information on it. But again, I realize many of you are white label partners. You don't need to acquire debt. You already have some non-performing debt that this can be used with. So understood. So once we have the debt, then what we can do is, if you wish, you can assign it to a contingency litigation firm. So what does that mean? A couple of key words. Litigation means it's an organization that is focused on suing to resolve the indebtedness on your benefit, right? And then contingency means they don't charge up front, because you and I both know if you go to a law firm and just start paying them hourly rates, you might be paying $250, $500 an hour, somewhere in that range. That can be very expensive. So what we advocate for is using a contingency-based attorney or a litigation firm whereby there are no upfront costs, and then they handle the collection process. Now, we've talked about there's different ways to litigate debt. And again, this is relevant if you've bought a debt portfolio, or if you're just simply a white label partner and you have some clients that have not paid, so you have non-performing contracts. You can certainly use a collection agency that will report negative on their credit and send them letters and such. And that's an okay strategy, but I think you'll find better results through the litigation approach. A lot of these folks that don't pay their bills, they already have messed up credit. So one more derogatory reporting on their credit is often not a very big stick, not a very big threat, not a very big, it doesn't have much teeth to it. But suing them and garnishing their wages and emptying their bank accounts and having a sheriff's sale of their property is much more motivating. So different ways to collect. We're talking about the litigation process today. So the key steps in the litigation process, and this is true rather, let's say you're a white label partner and you have some clients that have not performed, and so they're in default of agreement. So rather you're doing it, you're hiring a law firm or using this concept here. Here are the key steps in the process. First, a citation needs to be created, and the citation there's three main levels of courts that you could create a citation for. It could be federal courts, state courts, or what we call local or small claims courts. Each of which have their own rules and require documentation. But the citation, regardless of which court it is specifically the demand, if you will. This person owes you this amount for this reason. Now, depending on which of those court systems you file in, local, state, or federal, the amount of information will vary. We're big advocates for the small claims courts because they're easy to navigate. The problem is small claims courts will usually only go up to $20,000. So if you have a bigger claim against one individual, you either have to reduce that claim or go to a higher court. But the citation is the outline of what is owed. Now, our approach to litigation is we want to provide that citation to the debtor in advance to say, hey, here's what's going to happen. If you don't make arrangements, don't resolve this, you're going to be sued. And here's the exact citation or a very close example that will be filed. So it's not fraudulent. It's not too aggressive. It's not saying, oh, we've already filed, you're being served via this notice, but it's instead clarifying, hey, you owe money. They owe you money. Let's take Bernard. Bernard has a number of clients, unfortunately, as a white label partner that owes him money. And so he needs to normally have invoiced them first, and then, which is not shown on this list, that would be prior to A, and then the citation needs to go to them. Now, some of you may be of a different mindset that you just want the official citation to go to them, not a warning citation. I'm a big advocate, and most of the courts advocate for trying to resolve it outside of court if possible to save the court's time. So you can let them know, hey, final notice, pay up or make some sort of payment arrangements, or you're going to be sued. You will be sued. And so that is a step, but ultimately through the court, a formal citation has to be created with the court seal, and then it has to be provided service. In other words, it has to be delivered or an attempt to deliver to the person. Now, some people think they're crafty. Okay, when the process server or the sheriff comes knocking on my door at my house, I'm not going to answer, so I can't be sued. Well, all they need to do is make a reasonable attempt, document that, and then there can be substitute for service, which is frankly another motion. A motion is any time that you're asking the court to do something. But ultimately, we start with a citation that states what the person owes. Then there is service, or at least attempted service. And then now it's into the court system. What you and I know is that cases can be won or lost through motions. And this is where novices don't do this. They'll just file the suit and sit back. But a more sophisticated approach is to leverage motions to strengthen your case. There are multiple motions, and I even just gave you a different example of one, substitute for service, which isn't listed here. But the two primary motions that would be used in this process of flipping a debt for a profit starts with discovery. And discovery is requesting the other party to provide relevant information. And so we are active in litigating clients that don't pay. And so we have one client, Mr. King, out of Illinois. He didn't pay. And so we sued him. And so the citation has gone out and it's been serviced. And then we did a motion for discovery for Mr. King. But interestingly, Mr. King went out and hired an attorney, and he did a reverse motion discovery for us, which is fine because our record keeping's immaculate. So there were 5 questions that his law firm came back to us. So what's the point? You may have to be prepared as you start filing motions for discovery that the other party might also ask for discovery, but that's fine, and we'll always be able to substantiate it. So that's not a problem. Another another type of discovery, another type of motion that, in addition to discovery, that a lot of people I don't think use to its strength, are requests for admission. And again, I'm not an attorney, I can't train you on law, I'm just a paralegal, but request for admission is another type of motion whereby it's a yes or no series of questions. And keep in mind that whomever is being sued must provide the discovery responses, or they could be held in contempt of court. They can go to jail, and they must respond to the request for admissions, or again, contempt of court, they could go to jail. So request for admissions, there's a certain style, certain approach of developing those that in general, if you follow this model, you should win 99.999% of your cases. And so if you're a debt buyer, a very certain way of recovering, and we'll talk about money in a second. If you're one of our white label partners, a very effective way to resolve balances owed to you for clients that didn't participate. Ultimately, there has to be the court date. And as we talked a little bit on yesterday's training, with the pandemic, we saw some of the courts go to Zoom-based, but now there's a bit of a balancing. And as the plaintiff, as the individual filing the suit, many courts will now give you the option to say, do you want to do Zoom or not? Do you want to have telephonic hearings or not? And so typically you're going to say, nope, no, I don't want to do that. I want to sit down in person. I want to look this person face to face. Now, if the contract's written well, then it states jurisdiction, venue, where it's going to be held. And of course, that's important because someone's probably traveling, right? So this guy King out of Illinois, his attorney filed a motion against us and said, hey, you can't sue in Wood County, Texas. My client lives in Illinois. Well, the contract states that the case is going to be heard exclusively, in our case, in Wood County, Texas. So he had to go hire a Texas attorney, which he did, which is the one that did the discovery request. But his attorney will have the pleasure to come to in-person court hearing. So if you're doing litigation, which is the concept here to be able to flip debt, just keep in mind that there are other steps, but 4 key steps: getting the citation created, serving the person, or at least attempting to serve them, motions, which are strategic and very effective and are going to pretty much lock your case, possibly put the person in jail if they don't respond. And then, of course, ultimately is the in-court hearing. So the concept here of flipping debt is the opportunity to buy $100,000 of assets or more. And you would anticipate, that the expectation is to collect 100% of that amount. And then there's also the ability to nearly double that with late fees and punitive damages. So what questions do any of you have, regardless if you are one of our debt buyers and or if you're one of our white label partners and you have some clients that haven't paid you, and so you're trying to decide how to resolve that? What questions do any of you have about this 3-step process? Open to any questions. So we got a great group today. Alfred, Ben, Bernard, Carlos, Charles, Doug, other Doug, Jeanette, Joseph, Lynette, Lon, Pauline, Pierre, Terrence, Vincent, Wayne, and many others. Anyone have questions on this concept? Because again, the relevance is twofold, isn't it? The first is if you are a debt buyer or want to be a debt buyer, how you can follow a process to generate a profit. I believe most likely going to be more profitable with a lot less risk than flipping real estate or buying cryptocurrency. And then secondly, if you're a white label partner, invariably you may have some clients that don't pay as agreed. And if that's the case, then we need to make sure that you're able to collect off of that, the money that's owed. And this is one possible way. All right, so Lon has a question. He's asking about the timeline. So the timeline starts with getting an initial invoice out to the client to clarify the debt that they owe. And so that's not referenced here because it's not really part of the litigation process. It's pre-litigation. From the time that you get an invoice outline to the client, I mean, assuming that they've breached the contract, you can move forward right away and then get the citation to them. And then just as quickly as you want, you can give them a little bit of time to try to resolve that, get a payment plan set up, or you can go ahead and file the citation with the courts. And so then service will begin. So this time frame is typically about 2 weeks. Once the person's been serviced, then you can served, I guess you'd say, then you can go ahead and start the motions. As far as how long it takes, which is I think Lon's question for the in-person court hearing, that's determined based upon the court and when the court puts the case on the docket. So that can vary tremendously from court to court. What we always want to do, though, is try to resolve the debt outside of the court and save the court's time. And it may be just the threat of suit will get some people to pay so they don't go to court. Others may not until they get served will they be motivated to resolve and try to keep it out of court. Others, it may not be until they start seeing these motions come through that are quite demanding and onerous in many cases, and they decide, I don't want to do this, I'll just pay or make payment arrangements. Others will do nothing until the court hearing. And then, of course, even with the court hearing, you have some people that won't even show up. We had, it was, I guess, 2 weeks ago, we had 2 court hearings. We won both. We were at 100%. But we had 2 motions filed against us, and one of the 2 didn't even show up for that. So there's a pretty high probability that the defendant, the person that owes you money, will just not even stay engaged through the process. So that becomes what we call a default judgment. So Lon's question was a lot simpler than that. What is the time frame? And the time frame can vary. But the key is by going through the process, you're always seeking to remedy the default. Someone owes you money, and all you want them to do, you don't want to sue them. You don't want to make their life difficult. You just want them to do what they promised to do, right? And so you've invoiced them, you've asked them to pay, and they didn't. And then you show them a citation, say, I'm going to file this if you don't pay. And if they don't pay, then you file, and then we go through the process. So you could very well, Lon, see cash coming in at any point during this process. But worst case scenario, you end up in court, and with court, you're almost locked to victory because it's a clear breach of contract. All right, so thank you, Lon, for that question. Alfred's got the next. Other outlets. Well, yeah, so we talked about that if you own a debt portfolio, you can do really 3 or 4 primary strategies, one of which would be to litigate it, which we've talked about today. Another would be to send it to a collection agency, which we've talked about in prior trainings. The third is you could sell or resell the debt. And then the fourth is, depending upon how the debt is structured, you can even take it to AR financing or invoice factoring, depending upon how the debt is structured. So those are the 4 main ways to liquidate debt: collections, litigation, resell, or AR financing / factoring. Thank you, Alfred. All right, Pauline's asking for a template or script to send before taking action. So prior, we'll call it pre-litigation, what we made reference before citation, so it would be right in this space. You want to send them an invoice, and the invoice, Pauline, just simply needs to reference, hey, you signed this contract. Here's why you've breached it. So you want to state the reason for the breach. Is it a lack of participation? Is it a failure to pay? So your invoice, you're right, Pauline, needs to state why they owe you money, right? Because if you just send out a blanket invoice, people will think you're trying to be up to no good, but you need to put them on notice that they owe you money and why. So that's just going to be simply referencing the agreement and the reason that they owe you the money in the invoice. Simple, simple. All right, and so Lon's asking for what I would consider legal advice. So we can't give legal advice. We're not attorneys. I'm only a paralegal. So we can't give you specific legal advice, but we can talk about processes. And so that's what we've talked about. So if you want to use business paralegal for this process, we can take care of it for you. If you want to get some other litigation firm on, you can do that. If you want to do it yourself, you can do that. But we can't play the role of advisor, legal advisor, because we're not licensed attorneys. And we don't need to be for our own debt. All right, any other questions anyone has for today? Our goal was to briefly talk about how to flip debt for a profit, either as just a debt buyer, or most specifically for those of you that are white label partners that have some clients that are not paying, one strategy that you could use to help liquidate that accounts receivable. Pierre says this is great content. Well, thank you, Pierre. So, all right, well, we've covered this for today. We'll see you back tomorrow morning, same time, same place. And we're here to support you. If you're a white label partner, we're about halfway through the month. What we know is that you promised, you're committed to generating at least 8 clients per month. So we should have about 4 signed up under your white label contract now by June 14th, the time of this recording. That gives us the next 2 weeks to get the next 4. If we're off track, that's okay. We'll work with you. We'll help you. We need to be on track. We want to be helping at least 8 clients a month if you're a white label partner, because the result of that is that should be adding $100,000 of gross income to your business on a monthly basis. All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.